You ever dealt with someone who needs to be the center of attention, who constantly shifts blame, never admits fault, and always seems to twist your words? You might be dealing with a narcissist. Now, first off, I'm not here to diagnose anybody, but I am here to help you hold your power when you feel like it's constantly being taken from you. This isn't about revenge. This is about boundaries. It's about not feeding the very behavior that drains you. So today, we're diving into 6 things that make a narcissist absolutely miserable and why that matters for your peace. When you've been around someone who constantly pokes, provokes, or plays mind games, it's easy to feel like you're always on edge, like you're one comment away from exploding, shutting down, or doubting yourself. That's not by accident. That's by design. Narcissists, people with deeply manipulative and self-serving tendencies, don't just crave attention, they crave reaction. That reaction is their fuel. Your anger feeds their ego. Your tears tells them they still have power over you. Even your silence, if it's coming from a place of fear or defeat, tells them the hook is still in. And I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to play that game anymore. You can take back control without shouting, without proving anything, and without becoming someone you're not. It starts with emotional neutrality. Now, I know emotional neutrality might sound a little cold, like shutting off your emotions or pretending not to care, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is regulation. It's that calm, steady voice inside you that says, I see what's happening, and I choose not to respond from emotion, but from intention. Because here's the truth. When you start reacting less, they start losing grip. Let me break it down. You're in a conversation or maybe an argument. They say something that cuts deep. Could be a personal jab. Could be a twisted version of something you said. Could be a complete fabrication to push your buttons. And in that moment, your body tenses up. You feel your chest tighten. Your voice rises in your throat. And your brain starts preparing your defense, your clapback, or maybe even your retreat. That's exactly what they want. Because the moment they can get you to step out of your calm and into their chaos, they win. They shift the focus from the real issue to your reaction. Suddenly you're defending your tone, your words, your emotions. And the original problem, it disappears into the background. But when you stay neutral, calm, composed, emotionally steady, they're forced to sit with their own behavior. They don't get the dopamine hit of control. They don't get to spin the story. And that is what starts to make them miserable. Now, let me be clear. This isn't easy. It takes practice. It takes discipline. And it takes self-awareness. You might not get it right the first time. That's okay. You're not perfect. You're human. But every time you choose not to react, you're reclaiming your emotional energy. You're protecting your peace. And protecting your peace does not make you weak. It makes you wise. Sometimes that neutrality looks like a calm. I'm not going to engage in this right now. Sometimes it's, I hear you, without agreeing, defending, or explaining. And sometimes it's just a pause, a breath, a decision not to rise to the bait. And let me tell you, that pause, that breath, that moment of choosing yourself over their chaos, that is power. Because what you're doing is breaking the pattern. You're disrupting the cycle they've come to rely on. You're sending a clear message, not through yelling, not through arguing, but through calm presence that you are no longer available for emotional manipulation. Think about that. When someone can no longer pull your strings, they can no longer play the puppet master. And that loss of control, it frustrates them. It exposes them. And for the first time, they have to sit in the discomfort they usually project onto you. Now, here's where people often get tripped up. They confuse neutrality with detachment from truth. They think, if I don't speak up, am I letting them win? Am I letting bad behavior slide? No, not at all. You can still speak truth. You can still hold people accountable. You can still advocate for yourself. You're just doing it from a place of clarity, not chaos. Because when your voice comes from a regulated place, when your tone stays grounded, when your body language is steady, your words carry weight. People hear you differently. Narcissists can't twist your calm the way they twist your anger. They can't redirect your message when you're not shouting it from a place of pain. And that's the goal. Not to shut down, not to bottle it up, but to own your reaction, to choose your response, and to make peace louder than their noise. You don't owe anyone your emotional energy, especially not someone who abuses it. And here's something else I want you to remember. You're not responsible for fixing them. You're not responsible for waking them up. Your job isn't to teach them a lesson. Your job is to protect your peace, preserve your dignity, and stay anchored in your truth. If they grow from that, great. If they don't, that's not yours to carry. So the next time you feel that heat rising in your chest, the next time you feel the urge to defend your every move or explain your every word, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? And then respond not from emotion, but from intention. That's not weakness. That's not passivity. That's strength. That's leadership. And that's how you take back the wheel, because you can't control them. But you can control your response. And sometimes that quiet control, that calm refusal to play their game, that's the loudest message you'll ever send. And they'll hear it, even if they pretend they don't. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to prove your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Just stay steady, stay centered, stay you. But for a lot of us, that one little word carries weight because we've been conditioned by family, by culture, by toxic relationships to think that saying no needs to come with an explanation, an apology, or a 5-paragraph essay, especially when you're dealing with someone manipulative. And let's be real, if you're dealing with a narcissist, that's exactly what they're counting on. They don't want you to feel like you have to explain, because the moment you start justifying your boundary, they see it as an opening, a crack, a place they can slide in, question it, challenge it, or twist it back on you. But here's the truth. A boundary doesn't need to be explained to be valid. It doesn't have to be approved by the other person to be respected. And it certainly doesn't need to be defended like it's on trial. Because that boundary, that's not about them. It's about you. It's about honoring your peace, your limits, your time, and your energy. And when you set one, especially with someone who's used to walking all over them, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. And narcissists, they hate new rules, especially when they didn't write them. So here's what that might look like in real time. You get a message, a demand, a guilt trip dressed up like a favor. Maybe it's you never call me back, or you're being selfish, or I guess you don't care anymore. Before maybe you jump to explain, maybe you'd respond with 3 paragraphs about your busy week, your mental health, or how much you do care. Just trying to make them understand, just trying to keep the peace. But now you take a breath. You recognize the pattern, and instead of explaining, you set the boundary calmly, directly. I'm not available for that. I won't be continuing this conversation. That doesn't work for me. I'm not comfortable with that tone. No defense, no debate, just a line drawn with confidence and compassion. Now, will they like that? Probably not. In fact, they might push back harder. They might escalate. They might accuse you of being cold, distant, even cruel. But listen closely, because this part matters. The reaction to your boundary is not your responsibility. It's a reflection of their discomfort with not getting their way. And it's not a reflection of you being unkind. We've got to stop confusing boundaries with bad behavior. Saying no doesn't make you the villain. Saying no makes you honest. And here's something else that's important. A narcissist doesn't just hate boundaries because it limits their control. They hate them because it reveals something. It shows them you're no longer playing their game, that you've woken up to the pattern, that you're starting to protect the very thing they used to exploit, your time, your attention, your energy, your empathy. They don't hate the boundary itself. They hate what it represents, freedom. And here's what you might not realize until you start doing this work. Every time you set a boundary, even if it's met with resistance, you're sending a powerful message to yourself. I am worth protecting. My peace matters. I don't owe everyone access to me. Let that sink. Now look, none of this means you become rigid or heartless. This isn't about building walls so high no one can reach you. It's about building gates, doors, openings you control. You decide who comes in, how long they stay, and what behavior is allowed in your space. That's not selfish. That's healthy. And when someone, especially someone with narcissistic traits, gets upset about that, it's because they're losing access to your time, your reactions, your attention, your willingness to bend. And when that happens, you might feel guilt. You might second guess yourself. You might hear that voice inside saying, maybe I am being too much. That voice, that's not truth. That's conditioning. That's fear talking. That's the echo of old dynamics trying to keep you small. So when you hear it, pause, breathe. Remember, a healthy person will respect your boundary, even if they're surprised by it. A narcissist will resist your boundary because they benefited from you not having one. But your job isn't to manage their comfort. Your job is to manage your own emotional health, to build a life where you feel safe being you, not who someone else needs you to be, to feel in control. And listen, you don't have to do this perfectly. You're allowed to stumble. You're allowed to set a boundary and then feel shaky about it. You're allowed to say no and still feel guilty. That's part of the growth. It's part of the rewiring. You're breaking habits built over years, maybe decades, of over-explaining, over-accommodating, and over-functioning. But each time you choose to set the line, each time you say, this is what I will and will not accept, even if your voice shakes, even if your heart races, you're stepping back into your power. And trust me, narcissists notice that shift. They may not say it, they may pretend they don't care, but deep down, that calm confidence, that refusal to argue or explain, that's what makes them uneasy, because they can't control what they can't confuse. And you're no longer confused about your worth. You're no longer explaining your no. You're standing in your values. You're protecting your peace. And that is something they can't touch unless you let them. So let them be uncomfortable. Let them call it cold or mean. You don't need their permission to be healthy. You just need to keep showing up for yourself, calm, clear, and grounded. Because when your boundaries become your standard, you stop negotiating with people who only showed up for the loopholes. And you start living from a place of quiet strength. That's where your power lives, right there. In the space between what they want from you and what you've decided you will no longer give. If you've ever been in an argument where somehow, some way, you end up apologizing for something you didn't do. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling guilty, confused, and like the bad guy, chances are you were just handed someone else's baggage, and that baggage doesn't belong to you. But narcissists are masters of this game. They know how to turn the tables. They know how to spin the story so quickly, so subtly, that by the end of it, you're not even sure what's real anymore. You start to question yourself, your memory, your intentions. And that's exactly how they keep you in their grip. Here's the thing though, the moment you stop playing that game, the moment you stop defending yourself against false accusations, stop explaining your every move, stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix, you take away their power, not by fighting louder, but by refusing to engage in the blame cycle at all. That's not weakness, that's emotional maturity. And it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Let's break it down. When you confront a narcissist with a concern, let's say something small, like how they interrupted you during a meeting or spoke to you disrespectfully. Watch what happens. 9 times out of 10, they won't acknowledge it. They won't take ownership. Instead, they'll deflect. They'll say you're too sensitive. They'll bring up something you did 2 months ago. They'll twist your words and say, that's not what I said, or you're just trying to make me look bad. Suddenly, it's no longer about the issue. It's about you. And somehow, you're the one on the defensive. Now, in a healthy relationship, if someone gets called out, they might say, you're right, that was out of line, I'm sorry. But with a narcissist, accountability feels like a threat to their image. So instead of owning their behavior, they throw the spotlight back on you. Because if you're the problem, they don't have to change. And let's be honest, most of us, especially if we're empathetic, fall for this at first. We explain, we apologize, we say, maybe I am overreacting. We take the blame because it seems easier than the conflict. But easier doesn't mean healthier. What I want you to understand is this. You are not required to carry someone else's denial. You are not responsible for someone else's refusal to grow. And when someone constantly refuses to own their part, your best response is not to chase after accountability. It's to stand firm in yours, to say calmly and clearly, I know my truth. I'm not here to argue it. Let me give you a simple phrase that works wonders. That's not mine to carry. When they say you're overreacting, you can calmly respond, I'm allowed to feel how I feel, and I'm not here to argue my emotions. When they bring up the past to distract from the present, you can say, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about this. When they try to twist your words or make you feel guilty for setting a boundary, you can say, that's not what I said, and I won't continue this conversation if it turns into blame. So you're not avoiding the issue. You're refusing to be manipulated by it. You're keeping the conversation grounded. You're holding your center. And believe me, they'll notice the shift. They may escalate. They may throw more blame. But over time, they'll start to realize that this old strategy, the blame game, it doesn't work on you anymore. Now, here's where people often ask, but what if they never take responsibility? What if they never see what they're doing? And my answer is this: they might not. You can't force someone to change who doesn't want to grow. But what you can do is stop giving them the reward of your guilt. You can stop giving them your time, your energy, your need to be understood by someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. Because here's what happens when you stop playing the blame game. You create space. Space to see the truth more clearly. Space to heal from false responsibility. And space to rebuild your confidence, one choice at a time. And here's the deeper truth. You can be a good person and still refuse to be blamed for things that aren't yours. You can be kind and still say, that's not true. You can be compassionate and still walk away from a conversation that only exists to tear you down. There's a version of strength that isn't loud. It doesn't yell. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply stands firm, calm, centered. That's the kind of strength that throws narcissists off balance because they're used to control. They're used to reaction. They're used to being able to throw guilt like a grenade and watch you fall apart trying to clean up the mess. But when you stop picking up that guilt, you stop accepting false responsibility, you stop the pattern, and you start something else. You start reclaiming the clarity that was always yours. You start hearing your own voice again, not theirs. You start honoring your truth, not their version of it. You don't have to convince anyone. You don't have to argue your side to be valid. You don't have to fix a relationship by taking on all the blame just to keep the peace. Because that kind of peace, that's not real. That's silence dressed up as harmony. That's walking on eggshells and calling it love. You deserve better than that. You deserve relationships where accountability goes both ways, where growth is mutual, where truth doesn't get buried under blame. So if someone keeps shifting the spotlight, step out of it. Let them sit in their own discomfort. Let them wrestle with their own choices. And you stay rooted in reality. You stay committed to your integrity. You stay in control of your side of the street and no one else's. Because that's where your power lives. Right in that quiet refusal to carry what was never yours to begin with. Let's get into something that can shift the entire power dynamic with a narcissist. Not with conflict, not with confrontation, but with composure. Staying calm. Now, I know that might sound simple, but if you've ever dealt with someone who thrives on emotional chaos, someone who knows just what buttons to push, just how to twist your words, just how to provoke that reaction from you, then you know exactly how hard it is to keep your cool. But I'll tell you this, nothing frustrates a narcissist more than your calm, because your calm means they're not in control. Let's be clear, narcissists don't just want attention. They want control over the emotional climate of every interaction. They want to know they can stir you up, that they can say the right thing to make you raise your voice, doubt yourself, cry, explain, chase. When you get emotional, they get powerful. That's their playbook. So when you stop giving them that reaction, when you stay grounded, steady, and unbothered, they don't know what to do with it. You've removed the fuel from the fire, you've taken their leverage and turned it into air. But let's talk about what this looks like in real life, because staying calm doesn't mean you're disconnected or passive. It means you're intentional. You're no longer letting them dictate your emotional state. You're not mirroring their drama with more drama. You're anchoring yourself in self-control. Let's say they accuse you of being selfish, of always making things about you. They say it in that tone, sarcastic, cutting, meant to get under your skin. Now, before, you might have defended yourself, explained everything you've done for them, maybe even raised your voice to match their energy. You got caught in it. But now, you take a breath, you stay present, you say, I hear you. That's your perspective. That's it. You're not agreeing. You're not arguing. You're acknowledging, but you're not reacting. And let me tell you, that frustrates the hell out of them because they're not looking for resolution. They're looking for control. And here's something that needs to be said. Staying calm doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're letting them get away with something. It means you've shifted from reacting to responding. And those two things are worlds apart. Reacting is emotional. It's impulsive. It's triggered. Responding is measured. It's thoughtful. It's from a place of clarity. One puts them in control, the other puts you back in the driver's seat. Now listen, I'm not saying this is easy. When someone is baiting you, pushing you, trying to provoke a reaction, it takes serious strength to stand still in that storm. But that strength, it's what sets you free. Because narcissists need chaos to operate. They need confusion. They need emotional reactivity because it distracts you from seeing what's really going on. But when you stay calm, you start to see the pattern clearly. You see the manipulation. You see how often the goal was never to solve anything. It was just to stir the pot and stay in control. And that realization, that's powerful. It lets you walk into conversations differently. It lets you stop defending yourself for the 50th time over something you never did. It lets you end the cycle of trying to prove your worth to someone who's never going to see it clearly because they're too busy preserving their own ego. Sometimes your calm is your boundary. You're not arguing anymore. You're not playing the emotional tug of war. You're saying, without ever raising your voice, you don't get to pull me into your storm today. And here's what else happens when you stop reacting. They start exposing themselves. They start getting louder, more dramatic, more desperate. Why? Because the silence, you're calm, it's uncomfortable for them. They can't read you. They can't manipulate what they can't trigger. So they push harder, they try new tactics, they escalate. And your job? Stay rooted, stay present, stay still. Because at some point they'll realize they can't reach you the way they used to. The buttons they used to press don't work anymore. And that shift, that's not just frustrating for them. It's unsettling because it reveals something they can't ignore. They've lost control of the narrative. And that for someone who thrives on control is misery. Now, I want to be real with you. Staying calm doesn't always mean the situation will get better. It doesn't guarantee change. But what it does do is keep you sane. It keeps you grounded. It helps you make decisions from a place of strength, not survival. You stop reacting to their dysfunction and start responding from your clarity. And over time, you begin to live less from fear and more from intention. You'll find yourself walking away from arguments you used to get trapped in. You'll stop trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You'll start reserving your energy for the people who treat your peace like it matters. And when they come back, because they often do, and try to stir things up again, you won't meet them where they are. You'll stay where you are. Clear, calm, grounded. That doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're wise. Because here's the truth. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to defend your worth. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone who only listens to themselves. Your composure is your message. Your stillness is your strength. And your peace, that's your power. So let them spin, let them provoke, let them try to pull you into their chaos. You don't have to follow them there. You've done the emotional heavy lifting. You've learned how to stay present in moments that used to undo you. You've learned how to pause before reacting, how to breathe, how to hold on to yourself when they're doing everything they can to make you let go. And that's a kind of strength they'll never understand. Because the louder they get, the more clearly you'll hear your own truth. The more chaos they bring, the more sacred your peace will become. And the more they try to provoke you, the more power you'll feel in simply choosing not to bite. They want your reaction. What they fear most is your calm. So give it to them, not to hurt them, not to play games, but because you've outgrown the cycle. You don't owe them emotional access. You don't owe them a performance. You owe yourself peace. And now you've learned how to protect it.